So before we dive in, I will hand it over to Catherine to say a few words, and we'll go over to Laura. But really a pleasure to have both of you here today to talk about exporting. Is your company ready for exporting? And when it is time to scale globally, how to go about that effectively. So Catherine, I will hand it over to you.
Okay, great. So hopefully you can see my screen and it's not just a blurb.
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much, Tara. And welcome, Cindy. Feel free to reach out directly if you want to chat more, and anyone who's listening to this recording. So as mentioned, I'm Catherine, and I lead the Women in Trade strategy at Export Development Canada. I'm speaking with you today from Ottawa at the EDC head office on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, who we thank for sharing this land. So for those of you who don't know about EDC, we're Canada's export credit agency, and our job is to help Canadian companies do business successfully in international markets. So we use our deep knowledge of international trade and global buyers to take on and manage significant levels of risk to help Canadian companies grow their business. So how we do this is by equipping Canadian companies with the tools they need to succeed, the trade knowledge, financing solutions, equity, insurance, and connections. Depending on where a company is at in their export journey, different resources are available to support their planning and business needs. And I'll give a couple examples of that shortly. So EDC is part of what we call the federal family of organizations that work together to support Canadian companies as they venture abroad to grow and access new markets. We work really hand in hand, and we often call ourselves Team Canada. So we like to say there's no wrong door. So depending on the needs of a company and where they're at, we can ensure they're referred to the right organization. And this goes really beyond our really important and strong relationships with the Trade Commissioner Service, so TCS, as well as the Bank of Business Development Canada, BDC. We work with many different ecosystem players, women and business organizations, the different supplier diversity organizations, and we can make introductions directly to those organizations that might be able to better support. We also work very closely with financial institutions. They're a key strategic partner in supporting the delivery of the majority of our financial products, and I'll talk more about that. Okay, so we often talk about exporting as a strategy for growth. So we like to really put things in perspective. So the Canadian market represents less than 2% of the global economy, and the US alone has 10 times the population. So obviously, just thinking about those stats, 2% and 10 times, you can see how much opportunity there may exist for thinking about selling outside of Canada. There's been lots of studies done by reputable institutions such as Stats Canada, Deloitte, and the Conference Board of Canada that actually shows how exporters are more successful. So the first one is that they make more money. So obviously, with larger markets and a larger population, they have more opportunity to sell, which equals more opportunities for sales. They grow faster. So the report shows that they grow at a higher rate than non-exporters. They're also more productive and competitive. So Canadian companies that export are 30% more productive. And this is really because when you're starting to sell to international markets, you're able to create economies of scale, and this can help reduce costs and increase efficiencies. It also exposes you to new ideas, new ways of doing things, processes, and helps tap into other cost-effective resources and processes. It also helps with productivity and lowers overall costs, so you can be more productive here in Canada. The other one that we saw, especially with the pandemic and COVID, is really how it helps companies weather economic ups and downs. So putting all your eggs into one basket leaves your company more vulnerable. So really diversifying into multiple markets means you can spread your risk. The research also shows that exporters are more connected, they stay in business longer, and as mentioned, they're more innovative. Okay, so I'll talk really briefly just about the different resources that are available from EDC. So first I'll talk about the financial and knowledge solutions. So the first one I'd like to mention is knowledge. So at the beginning, companies are often seeking out information about exporting, how to get started, markets of interests, tips and tricks. I'll go quickly and share some of those examples. So all of these resources are available through a portal called My EDC. It's a free online resource you can access by signing up. I'll put the link in the chat. You can also just go on our website and find it under My EDC. So once you've signed up and created a My EDC account, these are some of the examples of the resources available. So Laura's going to talk a little bit more about FIT, the Forum for International Trade Training. EDC EDC has a really important and strategic partnership with FIT, and what we've developed together is what we call bite-sized modules that you can really read about various exporting topics. So Laura's going to give a really high-level overview about exporting 101, and in fact, all the different elements that she's going to touch on, you can dive deeper into these free modules available through the My EDC portal. We also have a great resource called Export Help Hub. This is a curated digital knowledge hub where you can go in and access questions and answers from other companies, other exporters like yourself. And if you don't see your answer, you can actually ask it and someone will get back to you within a couple of days. There's other guides and webinars that I've highlighted here that would be really great to check out. And then I've also given a link to our newsletter. Okay. One of the first financial tools that we speak to companies about when they start to sell outside of Canada is credit insurance. So credit insurance protects your profits and balance sheets by insuring against the risk of non-payment by your customers. It also allows you to be more competitive by offering better payment terms to your customers. And lastly, it can increase access to working capital as banks are more likely to assign lending values to foreign receivables which are insured. As companies grow and start to take on more and more contracts internationally, they require access to additional working capital to be able to scale more quickly, respond quickly to new opportunities, and invest into their business. So how EDC works is we work directly with companies' financial institutions, so your bank or credit union, to offer various guarantee programs so that the bank's risk is actually reduced, which gives them the confidence to provide more financing to their clients. So all of this is done in partnership with a company's financial institution. So we always encourage companies to start the conversation with their banking or credit union partner, and they can let you know how we see EDC fitting into the picture. Lastly, as mentioned, we're able to make introductions to our partners in the ecosystem to help ensure you're getting the right support depending on where you're at on your journey. Okay, so that's the end of a really quick overview. Here's my contact information. As mentioned, feel free to reach out to me directly or visit edc.ca and sign up for some of the various resources that I mentioned. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass it back. Well, not back. I'm going to pass it over to Laura, and she's going to provide the Exporting 101. Unless there's any questions, let me know.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. And can you see my screen? I just want to make sure. Okay,
yeah,
so today I just wanted to take you very high level, as Catherine mentioned, on this exporting journey. We call it Exporting 101. And this presentation today is specifically for women-owned businesses. As Catherine mentioned, we FIT and EDC have partnered to deliver globally recognized online training courses and workshops that offer you and your business valuable and practical, very practical skills that will help you improve your decision making, minimize risk, and maximize profitability. So FIT is the Forum for International Trade Training, and it is the global authority for international business training and certification. So whether your business is looking to upskill, or whether you yourself are looking to upskill, or you're looking for the team to upskill the team, we have curated paths for you that would fit your needs. So today's presentation, as I mentioned, will provide you with key learnings to get you started. Okay, so Tara had mentioned this is my bio. So all I want to highlight is that, you know, I have well over 20 years of experience coaching and mentoring companies, especially small businesses. So I worked for a foreign government, so I was helping small, medium-sized enterprises export their goods to Canada. So helping them find customers in Canada for whatever those goods were. And then as well, I work for a Canadian manufacturer. So I have experience trying to open up new markets for this Canadian manufacturer, new markets. The target market that we were looking at was Mexico. So a lot of my time has been spent in Latin America. I'm also a certified international trade professional, as was mentioned, and this is a designation that is certified. I am certified by the Forum for International Trade Training. Currently, I work at FIT in the partnerships and I'm as partnerships and community lead. But I also wanted to mention that I am a certified Incoterms trainer. So I dropped that on purpose because if you've never heard of Incoterms before, by the end of this presentation, you'll at least understand a little bit about what Incoterms are. And hopefully it's something that's going to prompt you to learn more about it if you're not familiar with Incoterms. So a little bit more on that later. And I've included my LinkedIn profile here, so feel free to connect with me if you'd like. So today I'm going to go from everything from export readiness, assessing market feasibility, suitability of your products and services for your target market, market entry strategies, international sales and marketing, and I will try to be brief because that is actually one of my favorite courses to teach. We're going to talk a little bit, brush a little bit on supply chain and logistics, and then touch a little bit on trade finance. So let's get going. So I understand, so I know, Cindy, I know your company, but maybe if you could just drop in the chat if you are currently exporting, and if you are currently exporting, what market or markets you're currently exporting to. So that would be helpful. And for anybody else on the line, I didn't mean to just single out Sydney, but if you can let me know if your company is currently exporting and markets. Okay, so feel free to drop that in the chat. In any case, I have a couple questions here. If we had more time and we could get to know each other, I would be very interested in learning your export experience, target markets, and what is the biggest challenge your company is facing. But I will take you through this exporting journey so that we can answer some of those questions about, where do you start? Maybe, am I perhaps too small to start exporting? So Catherine mentioned in her brief presentation about the reasons why. And so you need to determine your why. Why should you export? Should you export? Why should you export? And studies have shown that companies who export make more money, are more profitable, they're more efficient, they gain increased capabilities, whatever that might be. But determining your why is very important. I'm going to talk a little bit about characteristics of export-ready organizations. And then I'll share with you a link for a readiness assessment. So some of your why, your motivational factors for new ventures, because it's a bit daunting. So you really have to know your why. Why do you want to take on exporting? It's a little bit complicated. International trade is a little bit complex. There's more requirements, documentation, etc. But often it's not a question of should we start exporting. It's often a necessity that in order to remain, to find new, in order to increase revenue, in order to find new customers, perhaps the domestic pool of customers isn't large enough, so you do have to go to international markets. Maybe your company, your venture was born to export. Not all companies start by selling domestically and then looking for international markets. Maybe your company was born to export. So understanding what your motivational factor is. Catherine also mentioned, those economies of scale, employment, like increasing your capabilities. Sometimes with having a strategic partner, it's definitely win-win, and you can employ a specific technology, a unique technology or expertise from that strategic partner. So that's often part of this the motivation for exporting, for seeking new markets. And it can also be part of your long-term expansion goals. So knowing your why, once you've honed in on, what are you looking to do, what your goals are, the important thing is who needs to know. So it's important to have a team within your organization that can help do this strategic planning to understand, your why, understand your goals, and what strategy will you employ, doing your export planning, creating an export plan or an international business plan, international sales marketing plan, whatever it's called. But once you have that planning, once you know your goals, your motivation, it's very important for you to get people involved that can help make that happen. And I always talk about the buy-in. You need the buy-in. You need for your board members, if you have a board, you need board members to understand what your motivation is, what your goals are, what you're trying to do. You need investors, Sandpiper, you need your investors to understand what you're trying to do, understand those goals. Your executives, your C-suite executives, there needs to be buy-in there. Operations, finance, there needs to be buy-in. And when I worked for the manufacturer, the Canadian manufacturer, and we were in the electrical metering space, and they were very good at manufacturing, and we had a very good, important strategic partner, global strategic partner, except that all of our eggs were in one basket. So if that strategic partner decided to use another vendor, company would have had to close their doors. So I was hired as an export manager. I was hired to explore new opportunities for the company. And one of those opportunities we felt was in Mexico. So I researched, I planned. One of the first things I did actually in the first 3 months was to create an international sales and marketing plan. And there was a lot of skepticism. There was like, who's this new person? Why is she trying to go to Mexico? Why do we need to look at regulations in Mexico? We're used to producing, we're used to manufacturing our product. It complies with regulations in the United States, but Mexico, oh, that's scary. And frankly, people didn't like me. If they did not like me because there was a lot of fear, and they didn't understand what the goals were. So one of my first tasks was to have internal meetings, and this is what we're planning to do. This is the opportunity, in order to sell into the Mexican market, we are going to need to comply with these regulations, et cetera, et cetera. So once that was explained, and then there was a little bit less animosity, let's say, but a little more of an understanding that, okay, there's been some research, there's been some planning, there's strategy involved, and then they could see the whole picture, and they could see that those long-term goals. What came next with the rebranding, that didn't go over so well. Because in order to expand into the Mexican market or other international markets, it was felt that we needed to rebrand to get the company, the branding to match the level of, the quality of the product and service that we were offering. But that's a whole different thing that maybe we talk about on the marketing slide. But anyway, what's important is for those your stakeholders, that they need to know what your goals are. Very important, and it's not always easy. Speaking from my experience, it's not always easy. Okay, so some of the characteristics of successful exporting organizations is that products and services are successful domestically. Not always, as I mentioned, some companies are born to export, but in most cases, you have your business model, and you have success domestically, and then you're looking to take that product or service into another international market or into an international market. So another characteristic is that your product or service is unique in one or more ways. There has to be some kind of differentiating feature aspect to your product in order for it to be successful. Otherwise, costs are going to increase as you're taking your product domestically into international markets. You're going to have freight. You're going to have business development in another country. Marketing might have to change. So there are going to be incremental costs, and so it has to be unique. There has to be a market for that, and your product has to be competitively priced. Doesn't mean that has to be the cheapest, but it has to be competitively priced, because if you priced yourself out of the market, there's no point. Or if you can't offer your product or service at a competitive price, there's no point taking that target market on as a priority market. So another characteristic is that you have a solid domestic plan with proven effectiveness, as I said, successful domestically, specific advantages, something over the competition, willing to invest resources, so time, people, capital, without a return for a period of time. Things take longer, right? And that you have to understand that it's an investment. To find customers can sometimes take 1 year, 2 years, depending on your industry, relationship building, what target market you're going into, because some target markets, they need a long time for that relationship to germinate and for you to get traction. So sometimes you're just spending a lot of time, and you need to have the patience, and everybody involved in your export journey needs to understand that it does take longer. And another characteristic is that companies are sensitive to and aware of cultural differences in doing business in other countries. So that cultural sensitivity piece is really important, really, really important. So when we're looking at these characteristics, we also have to do our own internal analysis, our own gap analysis, maybe a SWOT. So does our venture possess some of these characteristics? Do we understand the concept of time? Do we have someone in our business that perhaps is either from that target market that we're trying to go into, or maybe speaks the language of that target market? So you need to do a specific, you need to assess your current state. Where are we now? Are we truly export ready? So hopefully when you do those analysis, you do, whether it's a SWOT analysis, or I'll show you on the next slide, an export readiness tool that you can use, which has 15 questions to help you assess your export readiness. But once you've done that, whichever kind of assessment you use, then that'll flush out your gaps. So you're going to have to define your gaps, and then you're going to have to figure out how are we going to address those gaps. So let's say in the example, this manufacturing company, this Canadian manufacturing company in the electrical metering space wants to export to Mexico. Well, they knew at least that they had to hire an export manager who spoke Spanish, because getting into the Mexican market, you can't get by with just English. So they understood that they needed to hire somebody with language skills. So I was hired because I spoke Spanish. I had experience in Latin America. And then I was also an export manager, a CITP, a Certified International Trade Professional. So I could start and with my international trade knowledge, I understood many of those complexities that the company would have to navigate. Everything from customs, like from classifying your product, HS codes. I understood what that was, because previously, and this is very typical, and I don't want to criticize, but for many manufacturing companies, for many small businesses, they just don't know what they don't know. So when I first started looking at the customs documentation, because they were already exporting with this one key strategic partner, and the paperwork had always been filled out the same way. It was just copied. Everything was copied from one shipment to the next without paying attention of HS codes, with Incoterms, with country of origin. How do you classify the product? So when I got in, I started asking questions. Why are you classifying this product like this? And is it the one big question, is it truly a product of Canada? Because the product that we were manufacturing had components from China, and it also had components from the United States. So we redesigned it, we assembled, but was that enough to warrant, was that enough for us to be able to classify it as a product of Canada? So this was the kind of stuff that was actually keeping me up at night, because I knew which questions to ask. And when I wasn't getting the right, I wasn't getting answers, because simply copying from, shipment documentation to, from one document to the next, I just didn't think that was good answer. So this kind of stuff was keeping me up at night, and I just kept digging because I knew the importance of this. I knew the importance of what you were writing on your documents. It's binding, it's legal, it's punitive. So if you are misclassifying your product, customs can come back for 5-6 years, and you might have to pay duty on that. So I understood the ramifications. So the company probably didn't know it at the time, but I helped them define their gaps. They understood which gaps was language, somebody that knew something about the specific region they were trying to target, and somebody that knew a little bit of about international trade and exporting, but I don't think they realized the gaps that they actually had. So we started to address those gaps and do the planning addressing our gaps. So I tell you all of this because if you're struggling a little bit and you just don't know what you don't know, you're not alone. There are many small businesses, there are many ventures that when they're first starting out, they just don't know what they don't know. They don't know where to start. So my EDC is fantastic because there's a lot of information. The trade, Catherine also mentioned, the Trade Commissioner Service, there's a lot of information there. There's a step-by-step guide to exporting. There's a lot of information out there. I think you just need to, perhaps someone, and that could be yourself, that just strategically goes through step by step, and just takes it on, because there's a lot of information. It can be overwhelming, but understand that maybe one of your gaps might be to hire someone with a specific skill set in international trade. Maybe that might be tapping into mentors, consultants, advisors. I mean, there's the wealth of information out there. There are many resources out there, companies, consultants. So you just have to just break it down. And if you need help, and get advice. And between Catherine's presentation and my presentation, I'm gonna which you will be getting a copy of. You'll have a lot of links and a lot of tools available to you. So I did mention that export readiness quiz. Those are 15 really good questions, like really good questions where you have to ask yourself, just honestly. Some of these are tough questions, so just answer it honestly and see if you truly are in a position to export. And if not, maybe address some of those gaps. At least it'll flush out some of your gaps. Okay, market feasibility. So screening markets, like have you screened markets? Have you screened markets for, size? What's the potential demand? What are the growth rates in that market? Trends? Can you actually access that market? Do you have, is there a particular license that you need maybe to enter to the market? Is there a particular certification that you need? Like maybe it's an organic certification. So do you have that certification? Do you have all the requirements to be able to access that market? So screening the markets, there are some great tools out there. There are some great tools that will help you screen markets, maybe establish market priorities. So I know Google has a fantastic tool called Market Finder, I believe, and where you punch in your URL for your company, and it will give you, with all of its great analytics, it'll give you 3 or 4 key markets that you might want to start with assessing, and they'll give you data and metrics on how many times, people have searched for your particular product or service. And just other great metrics, so that it will tell you, according to Google, but it will give you at least a starting point where you can investigate further, and then it will provide links to I think the corruption perceptions index on that country, so you can look to see that, well, that particular market, where do they rank on ease of doing business, or on that corruption perceptions index, or there's a lot of information. But I always have fun. I always tell my students, because I teach international business management, so I tell my students to go on, play around. There are so many sites I send my students to, but that one in particular is kind of interesting to just to see, what does Google tell me with my URL, my company website? So screening markets, establish your priorities. What I do want to mention to you is you do have to establish a priority, because all markets can't be your priorities. And 5, 6, 7 export markets should not be your priority unless you're a global corporation and you have regional offices. That's a little different, deep pockets. But when you're first starting out, or you're currently exporting, I wouldn't take on more than 1 or 2 priority markets at the same time. Because if you're going to do it right, it takes time, it takes a lot of research, it takes a lot of planning, and it's better to take the time with 1 priority market, and then get that traction in the market, and before you look to jumping to another priority market. So markets research, you have primary sources. So I'm going to talk in the case studies that are coming. I'll talk a little bit about primary research and interesting opportunities for primary research through trade missions, through trade shows. Like, people don't often doesn't come to mind, but there is no better forum. It's like a focus group. If it's a 3-day trade show, it's like a 3-day focus group, because you have all kinds of potential business partners and customers and different stakeholders that would pass by your booth and or at networking events, even if you don't have a booth, visiting a trade show, talking to other people. Like, that is primary research. So you've got primary research, you have secondary sources. So My EDC, fantastic. Trade Commissioner Service, you have market reports, by industry, by sector, by region. There's a wealth of free information out there. Sometimes when free information is not enough, please don't be afraid to get that specialized assistance, because those market research firms, those consultants, they can find that information. They're very efficient at finding that information, and they get great, the source of information is fantastic. When I was with a clean tech company, we needed to go to raise capital and to pitch to to pitch to venture capitalists, we needed that compelling piece of data which supported, forecast in the market. We couldn't get that. We couldn't get that from any sources that we could find. So we actually paid somebody to gather that intelligence and those forecasts for us. And that was the piece that we needed for our pitch deck, because if we didn't have that compelling, those forecasts, the projected demand, our pitch deck wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have resonated with the venture funds. So we needed to spend the money, and the return on our investment was well worthwhile. So don't be afraid when you can't find the information that you're looking for. Go to those, just get specialized assistance. Assess the market potential, truly assess that market potential. Don't just go on a hunch, have that data. It's very important. Assess your costs. Do you know truly what your costs are? Do you know what your landed costs are? So for you to get that product to your target market, do you understand, do you understand, well, first of all, if it's an actual product, like what shipping method you'll use, freight rates, a lot has changed since March 2020. So understanding all those costs, those landed costs, understanding the cost, like by using one market entry method versus another. So if you're going to go through a distributor, do you understand the margin that do you understand those price points, the margins that they require? Do you understand what margin you'll need to make in order to make this a profitable venture? What are the risks involved? So with doing business in that particular market. So there's a lot there. So determining, and so it's okay if you do this feasibility, if you do the research and then determine, you know what, this may not be a market for us. We're not going to make much money and this is going to take way too long. It's okay. So at that point, hopefully you're just walking away from a bit of research. You're walking away from, I don't know what your timelines might be, 6 months, a year, but at least you haven't set up, you haven't set up a sales office in a target market, or you haven't, invested and heavily into that market. So it's okay if the market truly isn't feasible. You're not going to do all of this for nothing. You still have to earn a margin. You still have to be profitable. How suitable is your product or your service for your target market? So, do you need to adapt that product for the market? For example, like let's say you're a biscuit manufacturer, cookie manufacturer. In some markets, they don't like their biscuits very sweet. Other markets, you have to up the sweetness. So knowing your market, knowing, personal like tastes and preferences, and whether you need to adapt that product or not. Regulatory compliance, I talked about this before. It's paramount. Really, you can't look at the suitability of your product and service without looking at that regulatory compliance piece. Can you in fact meet regulations in the market, and whatever industry that might be? That is just fundamental. Intellectual property protection. Do you have IP that you want to protect? How important is that IP protection to you? Are you going into a target market where, it's a little bit of the Wild West when it comes to IP? So you need to understand where your risks are, understand, if you need to protect your IP and how to go about doing that, and the timelines involved, etc. And then that product liability piece, right? Understanding the legislation around product liability. So this is an area where ignorance is not bliss, right? You need to understand the legislation, understand the risks, and then come up with some mitigation strategies for you to consider when producing goods for different target markets. So some of those adaptation options, everything from making no or only minor changes, maybe those are changes to the labeling, like in Canada. You know, you have to make sure that your label is in French and English, and then comply with specific labeling for your particular industry, your particular market. Making changes for compliance reasons, making changes for marketability. Maybe you need to change the color scheme. Maybe you need to change the packaging. Maybe you need to change one aspect of how the product actually functions or how you deliver your service, or make changes to create a truly global product. Like there are many global products that we can think of that are truly, like the big ones that we can think of that are truly global products. Okay, your market entry modes. You know, are you looking at, most of the time when I give Exporting 101 presentations, most of the companies that are online are typically looking at trade entry strategies, whether that's indirect exporting through another, like piggybacking with another local domestic company. That could be a local manufacturer, and you supply your product or service into that manufacturer, who then remanufactures and exports. Or direct exporting, where you're looking for perhaps a distributor or a wholesaler or a sales agent in your target market, and you'll be exporting directly through them. Or maybe you're going to go direct to the end, like a retailer in the target market. So that's direct, indirect exporting. And then whether or not there's an e-commerce component to that doesn't matter. That still falls under trading entry strategies. Then in the middle, you have transfer related. That's everything from licensing and franchising to some kind of loosely coupled strategic alliance. And then you have foreign direct investment strategies, where you might open up a branch office or a representation office, maybe form a joint venture. But typically, you would not start, if you're just starting to export, typically you wouldn't start by opening up a branch office. That comes later in the maturity of the venture with the priority market. Okay, international sales and marketing. I will be brief, which is very hard for me. So understanding, you know, sales and business development. I mentioned that it takes longer. It takes longer to develop those relationships, to do that business development. It's very fascinating. You know, that whole cross-cultural piece plays into sales and business development. Yeah, I was talking to another trade professional a couple of weeks ago. He actually was a guest speaker in one of my classes, and he was talking about doing business in Mexico. And then he had a sales presentation, and he was given 10 minutes. And he went into a room, and it was with one of the largest supermarket chains in Mexico. So it was a really important meeting. And he went into the room. He was there, and he was waiting in this big hall. And then the person he was going to meet with came, picked him up, and they were walking through these dark halls. And he's like, this is strange. And all of a sudden, his Mexican counterpart, turns on the lights, and he said, we have 10 minutes. And they had 10 minutes. I know. Tara, I can see your face. And Lynn, I can see your face too. 10 minutes. I was like, 10 minutes? How do you even get started? And he was like, we had 10 minutes. So a lot of that is to know, you know, to know your partner, your potential partner, know business style. And that can be very different if you're trying to do business with a supermarket chain with these busy retailers versus doing business with somebody else in another industry. Very different, but he had 10 minutes. So I was like, wow, I don't know how I would have handled that. So very interesting. And then what was interesting as well, like when we talk about sales and business development, this was Mexico. He had a lot of experience throughout Latin America, South America, as do I. But business culture, you can't say that business development and the way to conduct your meetings, or, you know, which entry mode you're going to use is very different whether you're talking about Mexico versus Chile versus Argentina, Brazil. So it's no one market. And that applies to the United States. The United States is not one market. Like, what is your market truly in the US? In the US, is it California? California has the same GDP as Canada. California has the same population as Canada. So, your market, your US market can't be like the Eastern Seaboard and California and the Midwest. You have to, understand your priority market might be the state of California or a specific area in California, or it could be New York, New Jersey, but understanding, those differences when you're trying to develop business and understanding how different it is, what people's styles are in terms of doing business. Do they want to get to know you? Do they want a long-term relationship? Do they, what are they looking for exactly? So then you talk about your marketing mix, your product. We already talked about adaptations, modifications that might be required. We talk about price and the unique challenges of price. And here's where I wanted to talk about Incoterms, because when we're talking about a price for a good that you're selling into an international market, really your price, unless you use an Incoterm, your price it's not really a price unless you spell out, then unless you have 5 pages in your contract and your pro forma invoice, which spells out everything, because an Incoterm is an international commercial term. So they are 3-letter acronyms. There are 11 of them. 4 of them are multimodal, 4 of them are maritime only Incoterms. So maybe if you've heard of an Incoterm, you've heard of something like FOB, free on board, or you've heard of CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. So what that means is that your price, if you're quoting somebody a price and you're saying FOB, so I'm just thinking, so let's say you were a chocolate manufacturer and the price of your box of chocolates, you want to quote an Italian buyer, and let's say it's $10 FOB, Port of Halifax. Well, that's very clear because your Italian buyer, and that's per unit. So your Italian buyers are going to understand that, okay, this is the FOB price for the manufacturer to deliver the product to the port and pay for the loading charges. That's what FOB is. But that's very different than saying, okay, my Ex Works price is $10, because Ex Works is, no, I expect you to arrange to pick it up. So arrange for transport. I'll make it available at my factory or at my facility, and you arrange for transport. So are we talking Ex Works $10? Are we talking FOB $10? Or maybe that Italian buyer says, well, I've never worked with you, new Canadian exporter. You need to deliver this product to me in Italy. And so they say, okay, well, and then they say, what's your price? And you've got to understand your costs involved. And they say, you know what, I would prefer if you quoted a CIF to Naples, right? So then your price is obviously not going to be $10 FOB because they're asking you to quote cost, insurance, and freight to Naples, to Napoli. So then it might be $12 per unit because you are then responsible for freight charges and insurance charges. You're responsible for getting that product to Napoli, and then your obligations, your costs are passed on to the buyer. So understanding price, and I mentioned Incoterms, just because if you have no idea what I just said and you've never heard of Incoterms, this is an area that you're going to need to look into. You won't be an expert. It can be a little bit complex, but it can definitely avoid misunderstanding between the exporter and the importer, or the seller and the buyer. So it's something that I always plant in every presentation because it's important for you to understand what it is, and maybe you want to rely on your third-party logistics provider or your freight forwarder or whatever other third-party company that provides you advice. They can explain to you, maybe they can help you, maybe they'll say to you, they'll advise, well, maybe we don't have experience going into that market. I would not suggest that you quote them with using this Incoterm, because then we're responsible for clearing it through through customs in the at the port of entry. So, you know, so you understand enough so that you can then reach out to your logistics and your freight partners, so that you can ask them the questions, maybe ask them what they would recommend, and at least understand what that means for you and your price. And because you need to put that price on your pro forma, you need to put that price on your commercial invoice. So it's important. Okay, place. How are you going to place your product? Are you going to place your product through a distributor, through a wholesaler, through some other intermediary? Are you going to use a value-added reseller? What does that look like for you and your business? And what does that look like in the target market? Because what you do domestically might not be the same as what you might do in your target market. So understanding what's the infrastructure like, what's the structure of the market, what are your competitors doing? Are they going through distributors? Are they going through master distributors? Are they going through some other intermediary? When I worked for that clean tech company, we went through value-added resellers, because that was our best way to place our product in the market, because it was technical. It needed a lot of explanation. It needed a lot of demonstration. So, you know, depends what your industry is. And then promotion. How are you gonna let people know that you're in the market? So how are you going to promote? What is your messaging like? How do you need to change up that messaging? Do you need to change up the messaging for your target market? What are the different channels that are available to you for promotion, etc. And then after sales and support, what does that look like in an international market? You might have your after sales service model for your domestic market, but your customers might be right down the road. But when your customer is thousands of miles away, what does that after sales service and support look like? Okay, e-commerce, there's a lot here, and I'm looking at the time. So just understanding what your requirements are. There is a module, so Catherine mentioned e-commerce, or she mentioned FitSkills Lite. So we have many units available on our website with bite-sized, they're not quite full modules, but there are different areas of international trade that maybe you just want to learn about e-commerce and how to set up an e-commerce model for your business. So this is an area that I welcome you to visit our website, check out the FitSkills Lite units. There's other FitSkills Lite units on for customs documentation, for example, and the documentary process that's involved. I'm leaving this success story in here, talks about the importance of B2B meetings and trade missions. I don't have time to go into it. This is here for you to look at. Digital services, some more links for you. Another success story from another company, that's WordCraft, a social media marketing agency. So just seeing how they started to export and how they found success. So I do welcome you to read that. I know I'm not doing it justice. Supply chain and logistics, don't you worry, I'm not going to go through every bullet here. But this is an area that you do have to, if you don't understand the whole supply chain and logistics, you should reach out to people that can help you in this area. Whether it's that procurement piece, the support activities, or if it's the main moving your product, logistics, like moving your product from Canada into a target market. International trade finance, Catherine touched on this. You need to, assess things, your risk in terms of currency, country risk, cash flow. So many available tools and resources available through my EDC and through Export Development Canada Solutions. Laws and ethics, again, ignorance is not bliss. Understand the role of laws, legal systems in the target markets you're going into. Understand you do have to make sure that you are complying with all the regulations in the market. Ethical challenges and issues, understand that although maybe you've heard from people that bribery is a way of doing business, bribery is not a way of doing business. It's unethical. It could land you in jail. So understand those unethical or those ethical challenges. Free trade agreements, understand that Canada has signed free trade agreements. There are 18 free trade agreements available to you. They doesn't mean that you have to choose a country that Canada has free trade agreement with, but there are many advantages through some of those trade agreements that you might want to leverage. Multiple links here for you. I'm going to just skip through these slides. So I've taken you from on an exporting journey from export readiness to touching a little bit on trade finance. We are here to help you. There are many resources available to you. There are many tools available. We want you to be trained. We want you to upskill so that you can understand some of these complexities. So we are offering 30% off for any Fit Skills training. So that's either Fit Skills whole courses or workshops. Here are the 6 full courses on the screen. Here's the code, discount code Sandpiper30 until December 15th. Just visit edc-fit.com so you can see a full listing of all of our courses and workshops. And if you want to ask me any questions, please reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you as best I can. That's it. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, and I just thank you so much, Laura. I think and Catherine, I think ultimately we can see the plethora of resources that are available at whatever stage your company might be in, especially specifically geared to women, which of course is who we are speaking to on a daily basis. So Cindy, I don't know if you had any questions or wanted to comment or add anything to chat, but I know you're trying to work along while taking all of this in. And we thank you for joining us today, along with the others. Okay, I think comments. But what we'll do, thank you for your time. Thank you to both of you. And it is unbelievable the scale of the information that's out there and sort of what you need to understand before you make a decision to sell a market and make that step in the process. So definitely relevant to both our portfolio companies and many companies that are currently in our pipeline. So thank you. We will post this over the next day or so and amplify it on our social media channels so people have a chance to watch this in their own time, including other members of our team. So thank you again, both. And yeah, hopefully we can stay in touch and we will be sharing these resources widely, and appreciate your time today.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.